Welcome. You're listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast, the show that cuts through the fog of war and updates you about the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts.
Hello, I'm Marina Yevshan, your host of the Russia-Ukraine War Report podcast, and today is August the 21st, 2024. It has been 3,859 days since Russia started covert military operations in Crimea, 10 years and 182 days since the start of the Russia-Ukraine war, 2 years and 179 days since Russia expanded its war of aggression, and 16 days since Ukraine counter-invaded Russia. Today's podcast covers the events that happened on Tuesday and Wednesday morning. You will find the Russia-Ukraine war map helpful to visualize the areas discussed. There is a link in the podcast description. Once again, there are a lot of map updates today. The Russia-Ukraine war report is compiled by our team from around the world. Today's report includes information from our direct contacts and journalists in Ukraine, the Russian Ministry of Defense, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine morning reports, operational commands north, south and east of Ukraine, open source intelligence, our in-house team of analysts and geospatial experts, and pro-Ukrainian and pro-Russian mail bloggers and social media channels with a track record of trying to be accurate. We have one mission, the truth, because the truth matters. Here is my daily assessment. 1. In our assessment, autocrat Vladimir Putin's order to recapture the Kursk region of Russia by October the 1st is unrealistic without redeploying assets from Ukraine. 2. We believe there is an extreme risk of Russian drone and missile attacks against civilians and civilian infrastructure between the 22nd to the 25th of August due to the upcoming Ukrainian Independence Day on the 24th of August. 3. We maintain Russia will restart sustained attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure by October, continuing Russian crimes against humanity that started in October 2022, as outlined in 4 arrest warrants issued by the International Criminal Court. 4. We maintain the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Russia has decided to ignore Ukraine's Kursk offensive and commit all available combat power in the Donetsk, New York and Pokrovsk areas of operation. 5. Despite the new increase in operational tempo, we maintain Russia has no strategic reserve available to mount an effective defense of the Kursk region, continues to suffer unsustainable losses, and has committed almost all of its available conventional forces in Ukraine. 6. Ukrainian forces do not have enough resources to defend Donetsk and the approaches to Pokrovsk and Selidova. 7. We maintain that Russia will achieve the operational goal of capturing New York and Donetsk in 2024, and we further assess that for Ukrainian forces an extended battle in an urban environment is ill-advised. 8. The Russian economy is weaker than reported. 9. Persistent delays in the delivery of promised military hardware, munitions and funding continue to prevent the Ukrainian armed forces from reaching their full combat potential. 10. The world is caught in the mutually assured destruction instability paradox, despite the Russian government ending nuclear threats after the Kursk counter-invasion started. 11. We maintain that the policy of escalation management implemented by the NATO alliance and the United States, and to a small extent Germany, is a failure and has proven to be ill-conceived. 12. The attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure have incrementally increased the chance of an intentional nuclear accident at multiple nuclear power plants. Today's report is a brief that will cover combat only. Yesterday, Russia carried out 166 discrete assaults, and through August the 20th, the 7-day moving average for daily attacks rose to 150, approaching its previous peak of 159. Almost 1,050 attacks have been carried out in the last 7 days. The VKS, that's the Russian Aerospace Forces, carried out 83 airstrikes, dropping 104 bombs on civilian and military targets in Ukraine. Russian ground forces conducted approximately 4,400 fire missions using tubed and barrel artillery. In the Kursk region of Russia, Ukraine has captured 1,284.5 square kilometers, with another 285 in the grey zone, for a total area of 1,569.5. Ukrainian forces control 93 hamlets, villages, settlements, and tactically significant areas, such as the Gazprom gas compressor and metering station at Sudzha. Of those, 33 are under full administrative control. The Glushkovsky salient, where approximately 2,200 Russian troops are isolated, is now 564.5 square kilometers, a decrease of 38.5 kilometers from yesterday. The Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Colonel General Alexander Syrskyi, gave a public briefing to the Verkhovna Rada, which showed the operational and tactical situation in the Kursk Oblast to the platoon level. There were numerous map changes based on today's briefing that required our team to re-evaluate the Kursk offensive. Let's go into the details of what happened on the battlefield. This would be a good time to open up the war map on a second device and find the city of Sumy, that's in the northeastern part of Ukraine. There is a link to the map in the podcast description. Ready? Here we go. I start in the Glushkovsky area of operation, or AO. Our understanding of the line of conflict was clarified by the Commander-in-Chief of the Ukrainian Armed Forces. According to Syrskyi's map, which appears as a magenta line on our war map, Troitska, Kulbaki, Novoivanovka and 2nd Muzhitsa are in the grey area. Russian mail bloggers reported that Ukrainian forces had started offensive operations in the Tetkina area. NASA Fire Information for Resource Management Systems, or FIRMS, showed significant fires in the areas of Byrdin and Karavyakovka, but there were no indications of combat activity. In breaking news, the second engineered bridge established by Russia over the same river northeast of Glushkova was destroyed by a Ukrainian guided rocket attack. Behind the front lines, Ukrainian drone operators are relentlessly hunting down Russian bridge layers, trying to advance to the same. In the Korenevo AO, General Syrskyi confirmed that Byakhovo, Snagost and Vishnyovka are under Ukrainian control. Russian sources walked back claims that Ukraine captured Krasnooktyabrsky, and Syrskyi's map showed the village remained contested. NASA firms showed that combat-related fires in Krasnooktyabrsky had ended, while indicating that fighting continued in Komarovka. Ukrainian forces remain on the east bank of the Krepna River in Korenevo. A second clip from the video claiming the VKS bombed a Ukrainian armored column advancing through the settlement that I told you about yesterday showed that the lead vehicle was a UAZ-452 Lgov that was also destroyed. Ukrainian forces don't operate the Lgov on the front lines, indicating that the attack was on a Russian armored column retreating across the Krepna River at Nikipilovka. And this is why we have trust issues. Whether it was a Ukrainian armored column advancing or a Russian armored column retreating, it didn't change the situation on the ground. Russian troops left eastern Korenevo. We reduced Ukraine's area of control in Tolpina to the eastern edge of the village. Syrskyi's map confirmed our earlier assessment that Ukrainian forces captured Vetrina, Matveevka, Zhebalovka and Durovka. He also reported that Krymiana was under Ukrainian control. The August the 17th video that showed elements of the Russian 810th Guards Naval Infantry Brigade in a disorganized retreat was geolocated in Lgovka. They bravely advanced in the direction of Moscow, trying to pass through the villages of Zhebalovka and Durovka, where Ukrainian forces were waiting. In the Lgov operational direction, or OD, Syrskyi's briefing provided some answers while raising new questions. Our reluctance to remove Ukrainian control from the salient northeast of Sheptuhovka was well placed, with Ukrainian control confirmed in most of the areas we had previously assessed. Russian sources claimed that elements of the 810th Naval Infantry were, quote, smashed broken in heavy fighting in the forests near Kauchuk. The same source claimed elements of the 18th Guards Motor Rifle Division are surrounded in Malaya Loknya, where recent videos have shown heavy fighting in the area of the main regional prison. We have high confidence that Russian troops are surrounded based on multiple Russian reports on area of control and the known status of Pogrebki. However, the prison is over 6 kilometers from where Syrskyi put the line of conflict. On August the 15th, we did note that Russian troops in Staraya Sorochina and northern Malaya Loknya were at risk of encirclement if Ukraine captured Orlovka and Novaya Sorochina. Out of an abundance of caution, we created a corridor of contested territory north of the settlement. We do not know if there are any prisoners, Russian or Ukrainian, in the compound. Elsewhere, Russian sources claimed Ukrainian forces advanced in the direction of Nechaev and Nizhnya Paravaya, with Syrskyi's briefing supporting the claim. Let's not forget about my home. Here is what happened in Ukraine, starting in the Kharkiv Oblast. In the Liptsy-Vovchansk-Yo, fighting continued in Vovchansk and the area of Hlyboke, with no change to the situation. Further south, in the Kupiansk-Yo, Russian attacks north of Sinkivka and northeast of Petropavlivka were repulsed. Russian forces shifted their attacks from Peshchane, probing Ukrainian defenses east of Stepovanovo-Selivka. Attempts to advance into the southern part of Berestove were unsuccessful. In the Luhansk Oblast, west of occupied Svatove, Russian forces concentrated their attacks east of Stelmachivka, suffered losses and retreated to their defensive positions. West of Kreminna, Russian attacks in the direction of Makiyivka, Grekivka, Novosadove and from Dibrova were repulsed. Now, let's talk about the Donbas, where the situation is very difficult for Ukrainian forces. We'll start in the northeastern part of the Donetsk Oblast. In the Syrskyi, Russian troops continued their operational pause, carrying out smaller attacks in the areas of Vyimka and Pereizne. In the Konstantinivka, Russian forces carried out 8 assaults on the western edges of the canal district of Chasiv Yar, the forested region west of Ivanivske, and in the area of Klishchiivka. The situation in the Toretsk-New York AO continued to deteriorate, although no significant Russian advances were recorded. Today's geolocations were all in areas we had previously assessed as under Russian control. Ukrainian forces continued to cling to the industrial district and northeastern New York, despite Russian forces reaching Nelipivka. Based on the latest intelligence, the remaining Ukrainian troops are at risk of encirclement. Fighting continued between Pivnichne and Toretsk and the western outskirts of Zalizne. A small Russian advance was recorded east of Panteleimonovka, and a Russian assault in the direction of Korenevo was repulsed. In southwestern Donetsk Oblast, Russian forces continued to make tactically significant gains in the Pokrovsk-AO. Russian attempts to advance in the direction of Vozdvizhenka and Zelene Pole were repulsed. Russian forces continued to make small gains in southeastern Hrodivka. Russian forces reached the eastern edge of Novohorodivka using the railroad grade, where the situation had already become difficult. Russian units are reporting that Ukrainian defensive positions have been left undefended as part of an apparent planned withdrawal. Fighting was reported in the area of Mykolaiivka, Zavidne, and north of Ptycha. Komishivka is still under Ukrainian control. In the Kurakhove-AO, Russian forces continue to be stuck between Netailov and Karlivka. Russian forces made a small advance into the northwestern panhandle of Krasnohorivka on the south bank of the Lozova River. fighting continued southeast of Kostiantynivka, where the Ukrainian 79th Brigade continued their Herculean defensive efforts. In the Vuhledar area, fighting was reported east of the T-532 highway near Vodyane. Today, our last section is the Russian front. In the Rostov region, the strategic fuel storage facility in Proletarsk continued to burn out of control with new explosions. 32 of the 76 storage tanks have been destroyed, with no indications that firefighters are having any success at stopping the destruction. The smoke plume extends for over 100 kilometers, and the prevailing winds are carrying the fire in the direction of the remaining tanks. And finally, a Ukrainian attack at Novoshakhtinsk, on the border with occupied Luhansk, destroyed a Russian S-300 anti-aircraft battery. What's air defense doing? And that's what we know. Your support of my home, Ukraine, helps us make history and protect the future for all.
You've been listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast. To help keep us independent, please consider providing financial support by becoming a patron. Want on-demand news in your hand? Download the Google News app and make Malcontent News one of your favorites to receive breaking news updates. Thank you for listening.